The private jet was only minutes away from taking off when a single father crawled out from beneath its landing gear with grease covering his hands and exhaustion written across his face. He had spent 14 straight hours fixing a problem that could have cost lives in the air. But instead of hearing a simple, "thank you," he watched the billionaire CEO tear up his invoice without even reading it. She coldly refused to pay him a single dollar, believing that a poor mechanic had no power to challenge someone like her. What happened next stunned the entire aviation industry. Within hours, pilots across the region quietly made the same decision. Not one of them was willing to fly her aircraft. The woman who believed money could buy everything suddenly discovered that respect was the one thing wealth could never purchase. Before we continue this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Kindness Vault so you never miss another heart-touching story that reminds us humanity still exists. The summer sun had already climbed high into the sky above the executive airport when Rowan Mercer wiped the sweat from his forehead and carefully packed away his tools. At 38 years old, Rowan had spent nearly half his life repairing aircraft. Every bolt he tightened, every wire he inspected, and every engine he restored carried one simple promise in his heart. Somewhere above the clouds, families trusted strangers like him with the people they loved most. He never considered aircraft maintenance just another job. It was a responsibility measured in human lives. Life, however, had never rewarded Rowan for his honesty. 3 years earlier his wife had lost her battle with an aggressive illness, leaving him alone to raise his 8-year-old daughter, Mira. Every morning before sunrise he prepared her breakfast, braided her hair after watching countless online tutorials, packed her school lunch, and hurried to whichever hangar needed emergency repairs. Every evening he returned home tired but determined to smile because he believed children deserved hope, even when adults were struggling to find it. Money was always tight. The small apartment they rented had peeling paint, the refrigerator made strange noises every night, and Rowan secretly skipped meals so Mira would never notice there wasn't enough food. Still, the little girl never complained. She proudly told everyone her father could fix anything that had wings. That reputation eventually reached one of the country's largest private aviation companies. Their founder and CEO, Serena Ashcroft, had built an empire worth billions. Financial magazines praised her sharp instincts while employees quietly feared her impossible standards. She demanded perfection from everyone around her but rarely offered gratitude in return. Success had convinced her that kindness was a weakness reserved for people who could not compete. When Serena's brand new private jet developed a dangerous hydraulic failure only hours before an international business summit, panic spread throughout the airport. Every delay threatened million-dollar contracts. Several maintenance teams had already failed to identify the hidden fault buried deep inside the landing gear system. Someone finally suggested calling Rowan Mercer. Although exhausted from another overnight repair, Rowan accepted immediately. He knew that if the aircraft remained grounded, hundreds of employees connected to Serena's business trip might suffer. Without hesitation he kissed Mira goodbye, promised to return before bedtime, and drove toward the airport. The inspection proved even more difficult than expected. A tiny crack hidden behind several layers of equipment had allowed hydraulic pressure to escape whenever the landing gear cycled. Missing that flaw could have caused catastrophic failure during landing. Rowan refused to rush. He dismantled panel after panel, replaced damaged components, tested every system repeatedly, and refused to sign off until every reading matched factory specifications. 14 hours later the aircraft was finally safe. Airport engineers admired the repair. Experienced pilots nodded with relief after reviewing Rowan's work. Even rival mechanics admitted few technicians possessed his patience or skill. Then Serena arrived. Instead of thanking the exhausted father standing beside the aircraft, she barely looked at him. Her attention remained fixed on her watch and the delayed departure schedule. When Rowan respectfully handed over the repair invoice, explaining that emergency work required specialized replacement parts and countless overtime hours, Serena glanced at the paper for only a second before tearing it into pieces. To her, Rowan was simply another contractor who should have felt honored to work on her aircraft. She claimed the repair had taken too long, accused him of exaggerating the cost, and insisted he should consider the opportunity itself as payment enough. Without another word she walked toward the jet, leaving tiny scraps of paper drifting across the concrete like broken promises. The surrounding workers stood frozen. Rowan quietly collected his toolbox. His hands trembled, not because of anger, but because he had already promised Mira they would finally celebrate her birthday that evening. The repair payment was supposed to cover her long-awaited bicycle. Now he wasn't sure he could even pay next month's rent. He drove home in silence. That evening he smiled through dinner while Mira excitedly described her school day. She never noticed that her father barely touched his food. After she fell asleep, Rowan sat alone beside the kitchen window studying unpaid bills until dawn. Meanwhile, news of Serena's treatment spread quickly through airport maintenance crews. Aviation is a world built on trust. Mechanics trust pilots. Pilots trust mechanics. Every safe landing depends upon mutual respect. When workers discovered that a mechanic had been denied payment after saving lives, many felt personally insulted. Captain Elias Vaughn, a veteran pilot with more than 25,000 flight hours, heard the story while preparing another charter flight. He knew Rowan's reputation well. Throughout his career, Rowan had repaired several aircraft that Elias later flew safely through severe weather. If Rowan said a repair required 14 hours, then 14 hours had been necessary. Elias quietly contacted other captains. No speeches were made. No protests were organized. No angry social media campaigns appeared. Instead, pilots simply reviewed company policy stating they retained the right to refuse flights whenever confidence between maintenance personnel and aircraft operators had been compromised. One by one, Serena's scheduled flights lost their captains. Replacement crews politely declined. Freelance pilots refused. International contract pilots refused. Each decision remained calm, professional, and perfectly legal. Within 2 days every aircraft registered under Serena's executive company remained parked on the ground. Business partners grew impatient. Investors demanded explanations. Journalists began asking uncomfortable questions. Serena initially blamed pilot shortages, weather conditions, and technical paperwork. But none of those excuses explained why experienced captains willingly accepted flights for competing companies while refusing hers. Finally, an elderly aviation consultant requested a private meeting. He gently explained something Serena had forgotten long ago. Aircraft never leave the ground because of money alone. They fly because thousands of ordinary professionals trust one another. The mechanic tightening a bolt before sunrise matters just as much as the billionaire signing business contracts after landing. For the first time in years, Serena had no answer. Curious, she began investigating Rowan Mercer herself. She expected to discover an irresponsible contractor trying to exploit wealthy clients. Instead, she found something completely different. Former employers described Rowan as the mechanic who never cut corners. Pilots called him one of the safest technicians they'd ever known. Parents remembered how he volunteered at aviation museums, inspiring children to believe they could achieve impossible dreams. His neighbors quietly shared how he repaired elderly residents' cars without charging them whenever they couldn't afford repairs. Even the owner of a small grocery store recalled several evenings when Rowan secretly purchased food for struggling families while pretending someone else had already paid. Serena felt increasingly uncomfortable. She realized she knew everything about corporate profits but almost nothing about the character of the man she had humiliated. Unable to ignore her conscience any longer, she drove alone to Rowan's modest apartment. She expected him to slam the door in her face. Instead she found Rowan kneeling beside Myra's old bicycle, carefully repairing its bent wheel with the same patience he used on million-dollar aircraft. The little girl smiled brightly despite the rust covering the bicycle frame. She proudly explained that her father could fix anything because he never gave up on broken things. Those simple words pierced Serena's heart more deeply than any newspaper criticism ever could. For several long moments she watched silently as Rowan adjusted the wheel until it spun perfectly straight. Only then did she fully understand. The man she had refused to pay treated an old bicycle with the same care he gave a private jet because people, not machines, were always his true priority. Tears quietly formed in Serena's eyes. The following morning she called an emergency press conference at the airport where everything had begun. Standing before mechanics, pilots, reporters, and employees, Serena publicly admitted she had been wrong. She acknowledged that arrogance had blinded her to the value of honest work. She apologized directly to Rowan and paid not only the original invoice but also additional compensation for the delay, along with funding Myra's education through university if Rowan accepted. The airport became completely silent. Everyone waited for Rowan's response. He slowly stepped forward, thanked Serena for taking responsibility, and accepted only the payment he had honestly earned. He politely declined the extra money, explaining that integrity loses its value when it becomes a price tag. His words spread across the country. Pilots returned. Flights resumed. But something far greater than business had changed. Serena established a national emergency fund protecting independent aviation mechanics from unfair treatment. Her company introduced mandatory respect training for executives, ensuring every employee, from janitors to engineers, received equal dignity. Rowan later accepted a leadership position training young aircraft technicians, teaching them that excellence begins with character long before skill. Years later, when people spoke about the incident, few remembered the delayed flight. Everyone remembered the lesson. The strongest engines cannot lift an aircraft if trust has been broken on the ground. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to Kindness Vault because every act of kindness deserves to be remembered and every good heart deserves to be celebrated. Special request. Comment, respect every honest worker. Red heart, if you believe kindness and integrity are worth more than wealth. As the evening sun painted the runway in shades of gold, another aircraft rose gracefully into the bright daytime sky. Rowan stood beside Myra, watching it disappear among the clouds. She slipped her small hand into his, smiling with quiet pride. In that peaceful moment, neither fame nor fortune mattered. A father's honesty had lifted far more than an airplane. It had lifted countless hearts, reminding the world that respect is earned through compassion, and that the greatest victories belong to those who choose kindness when no one is watching.